Jai Ma.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful thing. It's one of my favorite things, actually. When I started lecturing, I was terrified, because I thought, oh gosh. First of all, what do I know? And second of all, the responsibility of saying things properly, or saying true things, because people are depending on you for their spiritual life. And early mother just said, I actually learned this in 8th grade because I was doing a school play, and the director was my English teacher, Ms. Davis, and she was trying to calm our nerves, because we were all so nervous about opening night. And she said to us, she says, look, it's just your parents out in the audience. You can get up here and smell your shoe for an hour and they'll applaud. They'll be happy to hear you and happy to see you. And so I've taken refuge in that idea that as long as Mother's present, that it doesn't matter what we say. We can sit here and talk about, the best jokes in Reader's Digest. And if we've got Mother present, we'll all benefit greatly from that. So that's always been my prayer. It's like, Ma, whatever happens, just come. And that way we'll walk away at least fed and happy. So I've really come to depend on that ideal, try to set my mind for that. But yesterday we talked about it again. I've sort of slacked a little bit in that practice of reminding everybody the most important things, but I'm trying to revive it. So those 3 most important things that I found in the scriptures in my studies so far. The first is our earnestness and our sincerity. So we should take a moment to really establish that in ourselves. Why are we here? There's no obligation to be here. We don't have to be here at all. And so to sit in that space and to let that sincerity and that earnestness permeate ourselves. And the second of it, of course, the 1, 2, and 3 they're all equal. You just have to give them an order, because here we are, stuck in time-space. But the second one is from Jesus, this love for God, this love for each other. That the highest worship that we can do is to serve each other. And I always think of the Sangha, this being together here, as being kind of our petri dish. We're each other's laboratory for learning how to be vulnerable, for learning how to trust, for learning how to encourage, for learning how to be there for each other in a very real way. And petri dish, laboratory, because if we can't do it with each other, then we really don't have anything for anybody else. If as fellow seekers we can't find that ability to see God in each other, then we're not ready to give anything to the world. We're not ready yet. So practice that here. And then the third thing, of course, is that truth, that integrity inside, that your thoughts, your words, and your deeds are in alignment. That we're not hypocritical, we're not smug, better than thou religious people, but we're the servants of all, and that we've got that kind of approach about our spiritual life. Because our spiritual life at the end of the day is not about our practice, it's not about our meditation, it's not about our successes and failures, it's about love and how much we're able to love. Vivekananda says very clearly, he says, if you need a measure for your spiritual life, he says, first of all, don't measure your spiritual life, you're not capable of it. He says you have no idea, it takes an enlightened person to measure a spiritual life. So he says, don't bother judging your own meditations and whatnot, but if you want to measure for how you're doing, he says, ask yourself 2 questions. The first one, am I unselfish? To the degree that you're unselfish, to that degree you're succeeding in spiritual life. And he says the second question is very much like it. Am I loving? Am I known for being loving? To the degree that you can say yes to those 2 questions, to that degree you're becoming spiritual. And so always keep our eyes on that. No matter what else is talked about here, no matter how high we go into Vedanta philosophy, Advaitic oneness, and all of those beautiful ideals, it has to, at the end of the day, unlock our love, unlock our inhibitions to caring and to giving and to serving. So let's start in that place and sit comfortably in that place and enjoy that beauty. And then we're going to talk about prayer today. Someone early in the week, last week I guess, asked me about prayer. We got into a great conversation, and so we decided that that was going to be the topic for this round of lectures. So the Master says some surprising things, actually, about prayer. You know, usually we say, okay, what are the paths to God? We say, oh, there's 4 of them. You know, Raja, Bhakti, Karma, and Jnana. Right? Thakur adds a 5th one. Of course, you could subset it under Bhakti, but he says a 5th one here. He says 2 things. He said, let me assure you that a man can realize his inner self through sincere prayer. But to the extent that he has a desire to enjoy worldly objects, his vision of the self becomes obstructed. All right, so he says there that realization can be done through sincere prayer. So it's a very important practice. And it's a practice actually that has its root in every tradition. You know, there's this sense of communing with the divine. The Buddhists phrase it very differently, but they still have their bhakti side to it, with the bodhisattvas and their prayers to those for help, at least in some traditions of Buddhism. And then Thakur says, King Janaka lived a householder's life only after attaining perfection through austerity and prayer. So that's King Janaka, you know. He's the one famous householder anyway that had God realization. And so everybody, whenever they talk about is it possible to realize God, King Janaka's name always comes up. And so how did he do it? It says he did it through his austerity, one, you know, which is constantly realizing and going to the self for your contentment, taking refuge in the source of love that's within you, and not going outside of yourself to find your contentment. That was one practice. And then the second practice was this prayer, this constant communion with the beloved, with God in the heart. So it's a serious path, and it's one that's easily practiced and quite beautiful. I'm going to do a very dangerous thing here and drop out of my notes for a second, because there's a wonderful book called The Practice of the Presence of God with Brother Lawrence. This is why books will never work. Because you have to remember where you bought the book in order to know what app to open to get to it. Right? And who does that? Who organizes their library by where they buy their books? Okay. There it is. All right. This is Brother Lawrence. Are you familiar with him? I think we've talked about him before. He's a Christian monk, and he was a cook. That was his duty, was to cook for the monastery. And he became a saint through that cooking. He says several things here. He says, I found myself changed all at once, and my soul, which until that time was quite troubled, I felt a profound inward peace, as if she, meaning his soul, were in her center and place of rest. But ever since that time, I walked before God simply, in faith, with humility and with love, and I apply myself diligently to do nothing, and to think nothing, which may displease him. I hope that when I have done what I can, he will do with me what he pleases. And for what passes in me at present, I cannot express it. I have no pain, no difficulty about my state, because I have no will but that of God, which I endeavor to accomplish in all things, and to which I am so resigned that I would not take up a straw from the ground against his order, or from any other motive than purely out of this love for him. I have quit all forms of devotion. I've put aside all of the set prayers, but those to which my state obliges me, and I make it my business only to persevere in his holy presence, wherein I keep myself a simple attention, a general fond regard to God, which I may call an actual presence of God, or to speak better, a habitual, silent, and secret conversation of my soul with God, which often causes me joys and raptures inwardly, and sometimes also outwardly, so great that I am forced to use means to moderate them and prevent their appearance to others. So you see his simple practice of just keeping the idea of his beloved, of God, in mind all the time. That's the secret of the path of prayer, is to make your life a conscious dialogue with God, with the beloved. You go inside, he says, what's that thing? He says that there is in him a simple attention. Meaning it doesn't have to be all he's doing. It doesn't have to be the whole thing of what he's doing. He just keeps a constant, simple attention, a constant general fondness, he says, for God within. And the way to find that fondness, to find that sense within, is to think of something you love. To think of something that you love. And really, it's what meditation is built around. It's why we have these pictures here. We don't have these pictures here to remind us of Thakur as such. We have these pictures here to excite or to reflect that inner love, that inner devotion that's within us. But once you have that love, once you can feel that love, once you sense that love, it's important to separate it from the object that reflected it to you. It's important to separate it from the object and understand that all of the objects in the world of desire are only opportunities for reminding you of God. And that's why you like them. Because they remind you of God. And they raise up that blissful sense in yourself, which is your nature. They remind you of bliss, and they make you aware of that inner bliss. But it's the inner bliss that you love. It's your nature of being that you love. It's not the objects that are the opportunity for you to be reminded of it. So what you do is in your meditation, you let that love develop. You try and get that sense of love burning there within the heart. Stoke those coals of the sacrificial fire in you. And then abstract out the objects from it. And let just the love be there. And come to the understanding that all of the love you've enjoyed in your life did not come from the things you were enjoying. They didn't. You pick up a beautiful flower, what's it giving you? It's not giving you anything. You're looking at it and it's reflecting back something in you already present. And so instead of becoming slave to the flower so that you have to have a flower to feel loving, abstract it and understand, that feeling existed, the flower was the opportunity, but I can touch that any time. When you go to see a beautiful mountain, you see a beautiful sunset, or hearing your favorite song, you can do this all the time. When you go visit your mother for the first time, or when you see a newborn baby for the first time. It's this awareness that's important. At that moment, enjoy that love. Drink of it deeply. Don't worry, it's not the time for renunciation. That's not how renunciation works. What you do, the renunciation comes in that abstracting. You renounce the object, you keep the love. And understand that the object is not the source of that love, that you are the source of that love. That's mature renunciation, because then you don't need the objects. And they fall away, they drop away. You understand that you're independent and free from them. But you can enjoy that love that's within you. It's healthy. What's not healthy is that idea of objects, of having to have those things in order for that love to be present. So, let's see if I can find my way back to my notes. So that's from the practice of the presence of God. If you haven't read it, it's not a very big book. It's just a collection of a few letters. And there's not any deep philosophy in it. It's not something you could spend a whole lot of time with. The practice of that book is a practice of being, just a way of existing in God's world in a way that will bring you a great deal of joy in the end. The Rig Veda says, the human body is the temple of God. One who kindles the light of awareness within gets true light. The sacred flame of your inner shrine is constantly bright. The experience of unity is the fulfillment of human endeavor. The mysteries of life are revealed. This is one of the oldest scriptures in the world. Your body is a temple of God. Now let's break that down. Let's bring that home. What does he mean there? Certainly, if your body is a temple, if God is present there, you should know it, right? How are the practical ways of seeing that? Paying attention. Because the only reason we don't see that, the only reason we're not aware of that, is because we've gotten used to it. You don't appreciate it anymore. You don't think about it anymore. It's not new anymore. So this ability to love, we've gotten used to. But when you stop for a moment and reconsider it, how amazing it is. When you look at the way that we talk about our experiences, we use words that betray these notions. Like when somebody says, go think about something, what do? You reflect on it. Why would they use the word reflect in that exercise? This one's a subtle one.
I think because the mind is kind of reflecting
Yeah.
on what the heart has. So this is like the source, and the mind is like a mirror.
Yes.
It reflects. So anytime you think about something or ponder about something, you're reflecting on it because of the mental activity.
Yeah. You're not reflecting, that's very true actually, that you are in fact reflecting on it. But you can only see your thought when it's reflected in mind. You see? You are the source of the river. You're not the river. You are the source of thought, but you are not the thought. So your thought comes spontaneously from your nature, but you don't see it until it reflects in mind. And when you decide to own it after it's reflected, that's when it becomes calculated. That's when it gets refracted in ego. And it no longer expresses itself freely. It no longer goes from inside to outside without any refraction, without any twist to it. So that's what when the sages say you're not the doer, that's the first step. The doer is done in the minute, in the moment, always. All of your thoughts, everything happening is continually being manifested within you. But it reflects in the mind, and that's when you become aware of it. The same way that you've never seen your face, right? You've never seen your own face. It's impossible to do it. You've only seen a reflection of it. And, because the mirror doesn't follow us around all the time, we don't get confused about who's the reflection and who's the person, But with mind we do. Mind we get confused with who's the reflection and who's the person. And we begin to think that we're our thoughts. And once one thought gets reflected in the mind, it bounces around. You can watch it refract. You can watch the light go through the lens. It'll start as a simple thought, a simple thing, and then it'll become some big, crazy, wild thought that drags in all sorts of memories and all sorts of hopes and all sorts of desires, all sorts of moods, all kinds of things. And then when it finally expresses, when it finally comes out to the outside, it comes out in the form of a bark at your husband, or or a strong compulsion to buy that piece of candy, or something like that. When it started as a very simple thought, a very simple form, that really had almost no meaning. So your body is a temple, and you experience your body that way, do you not? It's separate from you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have to tell your finger to lift, You have to give these commands to the body, to make it work. And the body carries on doing things that you have no idea about. How many of you know how to dismantle a carrot and build an eyeball out of it? How many of you know how to dismantle a vegetable and build muscle tissue out of it? How many of you know how to take a cube of sugar and dismantle it into energy and to distribute it properly to the parts of your body that need that energy? See, the level of complexity in this body is way smarter than you are. You know, the level of complexity, the level of technology that we're living with in this body is greater than any cell phone that we've got. You know, and yet we marvel at the cell phone. But how many of us stand there and marvel at our bodies? You know, like, oh my God, how did that happen? You know, how did that happen? How did that body? I ate a carrot, and the body took it apart down to its molecular level, changed the nature of those molecules and connected them with other things, and then sent them to the proper places in the body that needed them. Those places took those individual molecules and reconstructed what they needed to fix things and to build things and grow things. So if this was us, we would have to do all of that. We would have to be aware of all of that. We'd have to know how that happens. But we're not. We inhabit a temple. We inhabit a body, you know, that thankfully knows how to take care of itself. We have to learn a few remedials, you know. Don't eat only cake. You know? Don't eat only carrots. Keep it varied. But like that, so we begin to pay attention and spiritual truth becomes obvious. That's one thing, so I've shared that many times, but it comes to mind, so Ma has a reason. This notion that I was talking to Swami Chidbrahmananda, helping him move into his new room, and we got in this conversation because he had 14 binders of handwritten notes that I was putting on the shelf. And I said, Maharaj, what are these? And he says, oh, those are my unpublished works. I was like, oh my God. And of course, for a moment, I had to reflect on what are my unpublished works. I honestly don't even have a single piece of paper of my unpublished works. And so I was like, oh, Maharaj, that's amazing, Maharaj. I said, you study so much. And then we got in this conversation about scripture and about studying, about learning. And he says, yes, you know, after all these years, I've learned that the scriptures are not there to tell us anything about what God is. He said, it's an impossible task. He said, the scriptures are there just to tell us what God is not, so that the obvious can become apparent. And I loved that notion. That's what we have to do, you see. We've become so accustomed with knowing everything. We give something a name and we think we know it. We don't, we've just given it a name. You know, as you get older and you start going to the doctor, they come up with more names of what's wrong with you. But when you actually want to know what's wrong with me, beyond knowing what it's called, they don't know anything else, you know? It's like, there's oh, you've got, you know, this condition. And so you're like, oh, well, what is that condition? Well, we don't really know. You know? But take this drug and it does a whole bunch of stuff, but one of them is this, and it'll sort of fix that. So this notion, you know, of letting that which is obvious in you become apparent, and that's why all the sages are talking about waking up. And through prayer, by living in that consciousness of befriending God, having at first it's an imaginary friend. I'll level with you. When you begin, it's having an imaginary friend, you know. But Thakur says, and Ramakrishna, Vivekananda also reiterates, and then the scriptures back that up, that what you imagine becomes real. You know, we talk about that quite a bit, that everything, that all this physical stuff you're looking at, if imagination didn't become real, we'd be sitting in the yard right now. Somebody imagined this building at some point. Somebody saw this piece of property and said, I'm going to put a house right there. And somebody drew it up, you know, and then money manifested, and boom, there's a house. So everything that is material, everything that's reflected in the material world, comes from your source, comes into the mind, and the mind manifests it in the material. So your body is this temple of God. One who kindles the light of awareness within gets true light. So what do? Kindle the light of awareness. How do you do that? Peter?
We practice the presence of God, as you were saying.
Yeah, exactly. You practice awareness. Kindle the light of awareness. Become aware. And how do you become aware? Stop turning off and letting things be automatic. All right? Stop letting things be automatic. You know, when I'm sitting here saying stuff, stop letting it just go in. Stop it on the way in and say, what's that? What are you saying? That's how you read the scriptures. So many times when we read the scriptures, Sri Nisargadatta has a wonderful practice for kindling the light of awareness. When you read the scripture, he says, read it for the first time, every time. Don't ever make the mistake of thinking you've read that scripture before, because he said every particle in the universe is different at this moment than it was the last time you read this scripture. Every atom in your body is different, changed positions. There's nothing the same. So do not make the mistake of thinking that you're doing the same thing twice. Read the scriptures new. So when something says, one who kindles the light of awareness within gets true light, we just kind of take that in, like, okay, that's cool, what's next? But it's a big clue that God is obvious. The spiritual path is obvious. Your holy nature is obvious. Your Satchitananda, being transcendental and outside time, space, and causation, is obvious to the person who's kindling awareness, who's not letting extraordinary things be ordinary things.
I feel like if we're sitting quietly, trying to kindle awareness, that seems more doable. But then, in a moment of activity, someone says, "Peter, go move the microphone." That moment, then the reaction comes, and then suddenly it feels like you need to move this body and get all this activity happening. How do you cultivate that same awareness in the midst of that action?
Ask questions all the time. Who's Peter? Well, that's me. All the things that you do automatically, answer to the name Peter, get up and know what the microphone is, get up and put it where it belongs. Observe. All of this is a matter of habit. You learned to not be aware through a habit of not being aware. So you'll learn to be aware through the habit of being aware. So you start putting things in your way that will cause you to think, that will cause you to consider. Somebody calls your name, like, this morning I walked into the bathroom and that horror of seeing my reflection, I'm like, oh my God, what's happened to me, And so you think about that, I'm like, look at that, God, if I looked like that 20 years ago, I would have moved into the gym, you wouldn't have left at all. So you sit there and you begin thinking about that, wow, these changes, but I feel like I'm the same person that I was 20 years ago. My experience of life is the same, but boy, this body's way different. So you just get in the habit of noticing things. Just get in the habit, and for all of us, how's that going to be? Well, we start with meditation. The first one is to try and be aware of what's going on inside. The second thing is to ask questions. Stop this thing. Like last week, I had a whole meditation. I guess probably more like 3 weeks ago, where I was just kind of checking out my body, the fact that I'm separate from it, and I just raised my finger like that. Did I talk about this once before? Anyway, where I just raised my finger, and instead of just letting that just be as ordinary as it is, because how ordinary is that? I raise my finger 1,000 times a day. I began asking myself questions about it. How did you do that? I have no idea how I did that. Where did the impetus for doing that come from? I have no idea where that came from. What's happening at this moment? How is a thought that's happening presumably here? I can't even tell where my thoughts are happening. That's another big meditation. There's a bunch of, I'll share them with you here, some of these things, because they're silly, but these are what Swamis do. They sit there and look at their finger like, oh, check that out. Oh, do all kinds of things. And you sit there, you just wonder about it. How does that happen? And what is happening? And where is it originating from? And it's amazing because you can't answer any of these simple questions. These things that you do all the time that have become so mundane are such a huge mystery. They're full of potential and craziness.
Well, when you go to medical school, you find out a lot of answers for these things.
You get a lot of names.
You get a lot of names, and then you learn physiology, and then you can kind kind of visualize what's happening.
But see, the thing about that is I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
but I totally negate it. Because after all of the studying that's been done, we can't create one cell.
That is true.
We can't create even one cell. So how much do we know? We've got names for everything in there. We've got names for processes and names for all the parts and everything like that. That's all we have. We have names for it. We can't do it. You know, even now if you need a cell for an experiment, you gotta go find one. You can't be like, oh, even though we can list the grocery list of everything that's in that cell, we still can't do it.
Yeah, we can't conjure up a cell.
Yeah, can't make even one cell. You know, so that's the thing. Ask questions about your reality, about what's going on. Another thing that I did was I tried to figure out, okay, if I'm inhabiting my body, where am I in my body? And you know, in a general way, you think you know. Like, well, I'm up here. But try and figure out, like, so what I did was in the shrine, I sat there, I was like, okay, am I above or below my hand right now? I was like, it's really hard to determine. I was like, well, am I to the left or right of this one? Am I above or below? Because I was trying to find out where I am. You know?
With the same token, we don't know the seat of our soul. Where is the soul?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
people's Atma, where Atma resides.
Well, first of all, why do we talk about it in the third party? You know, why when I talk about me, where am I? That's the same question as where is Atman? Where is the seat of the soul? Where am I within me, within this body? And so you can't, I'll leave it to you to come to your conclusion. I couldn't find me. Like, I have an idea, but they're only ideas. It's not a knowing. You know, I can touch things, but when you actually sit there and pay attention and try to actually come up with a proximity, you know where your hand is, you know what it's touching. You're very aware of that. But it doesn't seem to have any relationship to where you are. You know, it doesn't seem to suggest any location for where I am. And the more I thought about it, I haven't come up with an answer, but I came up with a suspicion, and actually it was verified by scripture. I sort of felt like maybe I wasn't exactly in this thing, but that I was sort of literally just slightly behind it somehow. Because even when I touched the back of my head, I could be on either side of that. I don't. Anyway, these are crazy things.
In scriptures where I read that whenever body and the Atma leave the body, it goes from here.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I read. So,
Yeah, it goes
that's
out
what's
through
in
goes out through the top.
scriptures.
yeah. And the
For-
brain is the last one to leave. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of confusing sometimes.
Yeah, it's weird.
But does it matter
It's
where
very
you are?
strange. It doesn't matter, but you make a whole lot of assumptions about where you are. You know, you have no problem saying, "Honey, I'm at the grocery store." You know, honey, I'm going to bed early tonight. I'll be upstairs. So we talk about where we are all the time, but we
That's
really
the
don't.
physical eye.
Yeah,
That's only
exactly.
when you talk about eye, that's the physical body.
Yeah,
We're talking about anything else.
that's right. But that's the confusion.
Before heart transplantations, people will say, okay, the soul is in your heart, meditate here or meditate, so there. But after heart transplantations,
It's
people
somebody
are
else.
still there, so it is not somebody else's soul. It is still that, the
Yeah.
complexities of self, what
Yeah.
you are saying.
Yes, yes.
The very fact that we can create a self, we don't know who we are.
That's it.
And technology has made it a lot more, I would say, like, more vague.
Yeah.
Because, like,
More
you're on
clear.
Skype or something and somebody's sitting there, but they're right there in front of you, even though they're in India,
Mhm.
you know? So that kind of blurs the lines more.
Yes. No, that's true. What did you say?
When you said that I'm trying to find out where I am,
Mm-hmm.
but before that we have to know who am I? Do we know who am I?
Yes. That's exactly right.
I don't know. No, this is think about it. If I don't know what I'm looking for, then what can I look for?
No, that's true. That's true. But most of us don't walk around realizing we don't know who we are. Most of us will have a very, but it's very funny how we describe that. You know, when you think about when the best way that I tell people when I was in Chibuko, I said, you want to know what your attachments are, write your dating ad. You know, pretend you're writing a dating ad for yourself. That'll point out all of your attachments. You know, I like dogs and walking on the beach in the evening. And, I love Friends on television. And, you know, you'll just list out. So when somebody says, "Who are you?" that's exactly what you're going to do. Oh, I'm an engineer. Oh, I'm a New Yorker. You know, oh, I'm an American. We list all of these things that at the end of the day, they're just baggage, right? They're stuff you carry around. They're not really who you are. And so that's another clue. No attribute can stick to you. No attribute can stick to you.
Is it necessary to know who am I or where am I?
Necessary. That's an interesting word. It depends. It's necessary. No, it's not necessary in that sense. You're welcome to stick around in this world forever. No worries. But when it becomes necessary to you, when it becomes enough of a question to you, then it's important to you. You know, and through that knowledge, the sages say there's infinite freedom available to you. But we don't, until we begin to recognize what bondage looks like and what it feels like, we don't begin to get curious about what our nature is. So if we're just going on, like when I was a teenager, and I'm just going to be upfront, so I apologize ahead of time. When I was a teenager, freedom to me meant that I could stay out as late as I wanted, that I could, you know, I didn't at the time because I was a Christian, but I imagined being able to have sex whenever I wanted, and being able to eat whatever I wanted, and be able to, you know, listen to my music as loud as I wanted. And I had a wonderful, Neil Gallagher was the minister of my church, and you know, I was talking to him about that, and I was talking to him about what a bonded religion was. And because it was always all this lists, I can't do this, and I can't do that, and I can't do this, and I can't do that. I was like, you know, if I want to be free, religion's the first thing I'm going to dump out the window. You know, because that was what I thought freedom was, to be able to do whatever I wanted to do.
Little did you know.
Yeah, well, little do you know, because I did. I pitched religion out the window for the second third of my life. And, boy, did I learn a lot from that. But, yeah, the first thing that I learned is what he told me that day. You're not free to say yes to something until you're free to say no to it. And what you begin to understand is that when I was walking on that street, my standard story, smelling pizza that day, you know, in San Francisco, I always remember that contentment that I felt for that moment with the sun shining. It was a spring day. I was in San Francisco. It was just beautiful, and I was just rejoicing at what amazing, how beautiful life was. And then I smelled pizza, you know, and suddenly I was enslaved. I wasn't free and content and enjoying the moment anymore. Now I was desiring pizza. You see, and so I'm not free to desire. Desire is not a natural state for me. Contentment is a natural state for me. I get pulled from that by the senses, you know, the senses and samskara, memory, you know, which is just stored up attachment. You know, and that causes desire, and then you're enslaved to the desire. Now that you've been reminded of pizza and all the things align, now you have to go find money to buy pizza. You know, if you're a householder, that's not a big deal. If you're a brahmachari, the dollar could be a long way off, you know, for that slice of pizza. So you see those things like that when you begin to understand, when you look carefully at your life and you realize that your nature is contentment. And that to want something, regardless of what it is that you want, that becomes the bondage when you recognize that it's pulling you out of contentment. It's pulling you out of a place of peace. And when you become aware of that, you begin to see how you've got this big hook in your nose. And that this whole, especially this society, is tugging on that hook all the time. You know, you've probably got this. I'm going to share one of my secrets with you so that you can maybe make money off it, become a famous artist someday. Because that was my goal at the time I thought of this. I was going to do, this was before I was back into religion, but I was recognizing this notion of ads and advertising pulling me everywhere. And I thought what I was going to do for my art piece was to stand in the middle of the room and tie strings to all of the sense receptors on my body and plaster the whole room with brand names and advertisements, just the whole room. And from each one a string was going to come and be tied to my ear, tied to my nose, you know, tied to all the parts of my body. And I was just going to stand in the room unable to move because strings were holding me stuck. To kind of picture this notion, to come up with a physical representation of what it is to be a slave to desire. That you can't move, you can't be free, you can't be in that wonderful space of peace. So we're way off topic. So this notion of this peace, he says, the sacred flame of your inner shrine is constantly bright. So this awareness will bring you to that understanding that this inner shrine, this sacred flame of life, of living, of love that's pouring out of you is always bright. It doesn't flag. It's not good some days and bad the other days. It's not weak some mornings and strong some afternoons. It's always bright. And to develop this walk with the beloved, to walk with God, you have to become aware of this, because that's his presence with you. That's how you know he's there. And after a while, this imagination, this imaginary friend, becomes an awareness of an existing friend. And this awareness of this existing friend keeps bringing you back to that place of contentment. You smell the pizza, and you can go running to Takur and be like, smell that pizza. Isn't that beautiful, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful? And you just keep walking, content to be smelling pizza. Now you don't have to go get pizza. You can just enjoy the very smell of pizza and realize that you're content. I'm with the friend already. My love is full already. So you walk along and now you smell the bakery. You know, and normally you would have had a piece of pizza and now you're going into the bakery, and when you go a little bit farther you would have, ended up with another thing. Now you don't. Now you can walk along and the senses can be enjoyable. You can enjoy that smell as it comes and goes. You can enjoy the bakery as it comes and passes. You can enjoy the feeling of being tired as it comes and goes without having to be a slave to it. You come to understand, no, my contentment doesn't come by running after those things. My contentment is before those things. And then I can enjoy my state. I remember I used to go, there's these Lion Street steps in San Francisco where the hill was too steep for a road, so they just put in stairs. It's called Lion Street. And I used to go over there and run, there's 3 blocks of stairs. And I used to just go walk them up and down 6 times for my exercise. Oof, horrible. And I used to, on that 3rd, 4th time, when you're only halfway through, and you're like, oh my God, you're going long. I found that this practice of becoming aware of a self that's content within, and that it's the body that's being exerted, and that you picture yourself doing what the scriptures say, that you're inhabiting a body. I changed my mind from being the exhausted body, from being, I'm tired, I need rest. Instead of making that confusion, I separated, the body's tired, the body needs rest, but I put myself on the back of my body as the rider, so that it didn't upset my contentment. I didn't need to rest to be content. And as a matter of fact, I found that I could push my body even harder without suffering for it. Because of that separation, it became clear. When I broke my leg, I was sitting with that immense pain. The same practice was so helpful to understand, yes, the leg hurts, yes, the body hurts, but I am that same contented self that I've always been. I do not have to be enslaved by the pain of my leg. Now, I'm not a saint, so it's not like I was whistling Dixie after that, but I found some separation. I found some peace, some idea, and I could validate it. I could say, you know what, that's always been true. It's not me. You know, and that was even more fun when I kind of had this notion of, because you break your leg, your experience of life really doesn't change. You're still you, but the leg is broken. So you clearly get that separation. I'm not broken. I'm still the same thing I've always been. I'm right here, carrying on, but my leg's broken. The leg's an object. My body's an object. I'm not an object. So it helps you make that separation. He says that this stuff is always, this awareness, this truth, is always shining bright within you. By kindling this light of awareness, this practice of awareness, it says here, the experience, he says, the sacred flame of your inner shine is constantly bright. The experience of unity is the fulfillment of human endeavors. The mysteries of life are revealed. By practicing and cultivating this light of awareness, just not taking things for granted, not letting the names be enough, but simply becoming aware of what's going on in this process of life, the mysteries will be revealed. Your understanding of your nature will become obvious. And at some point, that's what they say in the end, you know, that the mother says, what, do you grow horns? You know, it's like, no. You just suddenly understand something that has always been there and you can't imagine how you had never seen it before. It's like when you run around the house looking for your cell phone, realizing you're talking on it. Have anybody done that? Please say at least one person's done that. Okay. Because I've done that. I was talking to Bill, it wasn't even that long ago, sitting there talking to him, and he asked me about my schedule, and I was like, where's my phone?
Where's my cell phone?
Yeah, where's my cell phone?
I've done that so many
I
times.
literally, I looked for like at least a minute and a half, so that's probably a rating of intelligence there. Running around, anyway. So coming to the reservoir, the master said to M, look at the fish. Meditating on the formless God is like swimming joyfully like these fish in the ocean of bliss and consciousness. This is the idea of being aware of that nature. To swim in bliss, to swim in consciousness. That's what this world becomes. When that separation becomes clearer, when you know that your nature is love, and that love is what I was going to say love makes you happy. That's part of the trap. Loving is your contentment.
Very good.
Loving is your contentment. You know, and once you understand that, it's no longer a mystery. You don't wake up in the morning and be like, oh, I'm in such a bad mood and I'm stuck in a bad mood for the whole day. No, you're not. The instant cure to a bad mood is to go into the kitchen and make a sandwich for somebody and go out on the street and find who it was you made it for and give it to them, you know.
But loving is natural, only we learn the bad habit of not being loving.
That's right, because we
I
take...
mean, children are so loving, nobody teaches them to be loving. They are naturally very loving.
That's perfect. That's exactly right. Know that about yourself. And so when you're feeling contrary to that, know that opening that gate of love will be a cure to that malady. Depression. You know, depression, the problem with depression is what does it do? It turns all of your views in on yourself. You know, life is so bad, nothing's worthwhile, nothing blah blah blah. You know, stop. Very hard to do, but you can make yourself go. I'm using a sandwich as a metaphor there, but go do something for somebody. Sit down when you're depressed, write a card appreciating your mother, or write a card appreciating your neighbor at the office, or call up somebody and invite them over and start cooking a wonderful dinner for them. You know, service is the antithesis of depression. It's the expression of your nature, and no one can express their nature and not return to their contentment. Not be once again reminded of what you are and where all of this comes from. So Thakur saw it at the fish. So Thakur sees a fish swimming around. He says, look, if you're meditating on the formless God, if you're seeing God everywhere, if you're understanding that all of this has become a symbol of that, if you become aware of this divine friend, as it were, this divine presence of God within, It's like swimming in an ocean of bliss.
But here is a interesting thing. The piece is swimming around.
Mhm.
There's one way to look at it. But the fish is swimming around to find some food, desire. So aren't those two things contradictory to each other?
No, not really, because what Thakur is talking about here is when your life is still going to go on when you realize God, but you'll have a companion, and your contentment, your fullness is presupposed. So you'll watch the play happen, but it'll be a play. It'll be a scripted play. You'll watch it happen in front of you. You'll see that smell of pizza come into the nose. You'll see that smell of pizza connect to an attachment in memory. You'll see that memory come up to the forefront. You'll watch it all happen. But you will be able to say, I'm going to keep walking and keep watching. You know, or you can decide to go in and get a piece of pizza. That's your freedom. One doesn't mean the other anymore. Your experience of it is from the lap of mother, as it were. I remember when I was a kid, this is a very odd memory to have, but I must have been no more than 3 years old or so, because my mother was holding me, and I remember that she had this wild 1960s silk shirt on, I remember, blue with all these weird paisleys and stuff on it. And she was holding me, and we were at the grocery store, and a friend of my father came over and started talking to her, and then started paying attention to me. And I remember I was terrified of him. I was like, why are you, touching me? I was like, why are you touching me? I don't even know who you are, kind of thing. And I just remember turning and burying my head in my mother's arm, in the crook of her arm, and just feeling the comfort of that. Now that man was still there. All of that weird stuff that was freaking me out was still there. But my refuge was the crook of my mother's arm. And he could poke my hair and do whatever he was doing. It didn't matter anymore because I had my security. And so this is very akin to that. It's turning your face into the crook of mother's arm. And yes, all this stuff is still going to happen, but your contentment and your inner composure is before it. It's established.
It's surrendering to God. It's like a way of accepting and surrendering that life is in your kind of.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's interesting because when you say that, my first thought is like, well, it's taking refuge in God and sort of surrendering to the world in a sense. You're taking refuge in God, and that makes whatever happens in the world okay.
Mm-hmm.
So you're surrendering to that sense. It's like, it's all right.
Yeah.
These things all pass. Today I'm depressed. But the first thing to realize about being depressed is that you haven't always been depressed. That means that it's not a permanent state. That you can wait it out if you need to. And so it's like that. It's you can be in God. Know that your contentment and joy is alive and well. And let the world go on. Let it go on as it is. It's 12 o'clock. I got through two verses of where I was hoping to go. But it's this whole, it's all right, we'll do it next time. But there's this whole bliss, because really what I was hoping to walk away with myself this morning after this talk is just being fully reminded of how beautiful what we have is, and how powerful what we have been taught is. And that if we dare to practice this and dare to open to this, what the potentials of this life are is astounding. And that even if you don't get to the end and see the astounding, you can still exist in this moment in the profound. And life won't be locked in a cubicle of work. It won't be locked into a tax bracket. It won't be bounded by the next vacation and the previous vacation. That this information that we have here, if you even begin to practice it, changes the nature of being alive and makes even the most mundane and regular activity full of wonder and mystery and just profundity. And so to be reminded of that, and don't let this material world, in this material time, in this material country, convince you that you're material, and that your life is nothing but a plant that somebody else makes money off of, you know, because that really has become what our society is treating us like. You know, we don't even get offended by being called consumers. You know,
That's what we are.
It's
That's
no,
what they tell us.
yeah, that's horrible. The first time somebody used that word to describe me, we should have taken up the call of revolution at that moment. You know, that is unacceptable to refer to a human being as a consumer. Utterly unacceptable. And so don't surrender to it. You are not a consumer. You are the very expression of love itself, divine, you know.
That's the word you have.
For
Even if
patients now.
patients are consumer and clients now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's terrible.
yeah, don't believe it.
The whole essence of medicine has
Yes,
gone
yeah.
down.
Medicine
Become a
especially.
business.
Yeah.
You're a patient, a client, and a
Resources.
That's it.
And it's really a shame.
Yeah, no, it is. It is.
Why are we created this way?
They created what way? We define ourselves. No, we you see,
Yeah,
that's,
better plan.
that's part of the wonder, though. You see, we have all attributes and no attributes. We decide what we manifest. We decide that, you know. And this world, because most people have tied into the idea of being a body and mind. Bodies and minds consume, and egos demand. And if we surrender to that, we get pretty much what we've got, where everybody's just kind of coming up with an arrangement of mutual devouring. A mutual devouring, you know. You make this, I eat that. I make this, you eat that. Kind of thing, you know. So it's sort of this mutual devouring. We've chosen this. We've surrendered to this. And that the scriptures here are trying to give us a little bigger vision of that. Yeah.
Bringing us to reality.
Yeah. Well, yes, waking us up to an infinitely more beautiful state. And we don't require everybody else to change in order to become that.
That's the beauty.
You know, we just have to stop turning our heads when somebody says, "Hey, consumer."
But in the system is created to be destroyed eventually. It's a cycle of life.
Yes. No, that's right.
So if you don't build in those destructive properties within you, you will not be destructed. And unless you're destructive, you are recycling the whole thing over and over again.
Yeah. Well, destruction is grace. It's the biggest manifestation of grace.
It's just the other side of creation.
Yeah. Well, and it shows you, it's what keeps you from being permanently attached. It's what keeps you from being permanently attached.
That's the whole mystery is all about this human body. It's just, nobody really knows.
Yeah.
I mean, this morning there's a show, happens every Sunday morning, where a doctor, a physician, and even her own admission about the physician, how little they really know what is going on in the patient. And we think we know everything.
Yeah, that's why I say, keep poking at it, because certainly everybody will want you to believe they know everything. That's the nature of ego. You know? It's the nature of our own ego, and that's why we're only comfortable when we think that we know everything. And so we like to assume that we do. We're very comfortable. This is a chair, and this is a body, and this is a temple. It's sort of a house. It's sort of a living room. No, it's a temple. Wait. Kind of like that. We go along. We've named everything. We've given every form a name, and it makes us very comfortable. Name is knowledge. You know, the mind does two things. It notes difference and categorizes. That's all it does. And so as long as it's doing that, it's content. It feels like it's in control. It knows what's going on. But noting difference and categorizing is not at all understanding nature of something, the essence of something. You know, so it's a fake knowledge. And it's a fake knowledge that has defined us. And
It's a meaningful word these days.
not fake news. Fake knowledge. Alternative facts.
Knowledge is supposed to be.
After such a good discussion.
That's a difference.
Yes, yes.
You know, Swamiji, they're making a business out of
Fake
being
news.
a rebellious person too.
Oh, sure.
So now even rebellion has become a consumerist type of thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like instead of
Sure.
eating regular GMO food and this and that, you go organic, you this, and then they're making a whole business out of that.
Yeah, they is we. Yeah, we have to be careful about that, you know, because there's not actually a they out there. It's a we. We interpret and give meaning to everything, and so it's like that. Be free in yourself, and the world will change because the world only gets its value by the value you assign it.
Yep.
You know,
Leadership
So,
wants to see the
yeah.
world.
That's exactly it, and it really, really works. I've told that story. I have a very simple story, very low. It's not a self-praise story, but it sounds like that. I'm going to tell it anyway. You know, this idea that the world, anything out that we consider to be outside, which is questionable in the first place, anything you consider to be outside of yourself, does not have a value, positive or negative. It's just isness. When it hits you, ego gives it a value. Ego is a perspective, a point of reference. And because of that ego, things have plus and minus values to it. If you can learn to understand that this world just is, then you can accept it and start understanding its nature, which is Satchitananda. And without that particular point of reference, love becomes apparent. You know, that 9/11 is my favorite example for that, you know. As long as my ego exists as an American male of a certain age, 9/11 is a horrible, disastrous, terrible act of terrorism. If my point of reference was a fundamentalist 20-something Muslim in Afghanistan, 9/11 was a punching the dragon in the eye. You know, it was a sign of victory, a sign that I'm being empowered, I'm no longer being fed off of, you know. This huge imperialist power has been punched at least. So it's a great celebration, a cause for excitement. I'm not going to judge either one. Both of them exist and both of them are valid from a perspective. That's the nature of ego. But the event itself happened, it just was. You know, and what it was, I don't know because I don't know the nature of life yet. If life really is a dream, then nothing happened. You know. But love was expressed. And to see that as an act of love, I have to step into the world of that 20-something Muslim extremist. And I have to understand that love motivated those people to give up their lives for their religion in a view that they had. I'm again not going to judge the view. They loved their ideal enough to die in the cockpit of those planes that flew into that building. Now, I'm not going to praise that or anything about that, but I'm going to say, what is it that you love enough to get into the cockpit of a plane and fly it into a building? So that was an act of love. Now, albeit it was fundamentalist, so it was tainted with materialism, it was tainted with ego and perspective. And as we've talked about before, all of our actions are tainted with ego. If you're body identified, your act of love will benefit a few people, like flying into that building, benefited a small number of people who had shared that worldview, but it harmed a much larger number of people.
But that is selfishness, actually.
Sure, but it's love. Selfishness is only love of the self. You know, and if you remove ego, you can see love.
True love, like
You can see love.
for God is different.
You will naturally see the motive of love in everything that happens, but you have to be
But
completely
Swami,
detached.
the outcome of the love, whatever is called love, should be considered. If it is a misery to many people, is it a true love?
It is true love. Yeah, it's true love. What the problem is this. Maybe. Forgive me for being so confident in that. If your love is body and mind identified, like we'll take another great soul, Hitler. You know, he had an identity and an ideal, and his ideal was very body based: color of hair, the size of your forehead, the shape of your nose, the color of your eyes, his Aryan race. And those people that were in line with his ideal loved him, followed him, rejoiced in him. He was their manifestation of, finally, we get expression, right? They loved him, and he loved his ideal. Love was the motive of his life. But because it was so body and mind based, so material based, it benefited a very small number of people and harmed a huge number of people. Now, what's the difference between him and, say, like a Buddha or a Jesus? Their notion of self is spirit, infinite. They see themselves in everyone. So their act of love, coming from that spiritual notion of self, benefits a huge number of people and does harm a few people. There were those people that nailed Jesus to the cross, did it for a love of their own religious perspectives. They thought they were saving their status quo, their tradition, that this rebel was changing. But you see that Jesus' act of love benefited a huge number of people.
And it lives forever. Like it's like forever.
That's it. Love is eternal.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. Love is eternal. So that is why this is important. That's why it's significant to know the nature of yourself, so that your acts of love will benefit the largest number of people and harm the fewest number of people. Because so long as we think that we're a body and a mind, our acts of love will benefit only this body and mind and whoever is closely aligned with it. We'll take care of our family, we'll take care of our dog, the neighbors, they'll deal with themselves. But if we have that universal sense of self, we can't stand our neighbor's suffering. We'll be cooking to take the casserole over because he lost his job. So it's like that. Identify with your nature as Satchitananda and live your life. And you will live like Jesus, and you'll live like Thakur, and you'll live like Buddha. Keep on with this story of yourself as a body-mind, and you won't. You'll die a very mundane and ordinary life and be quickly forgotten. Which is not the aim or the problem. But nonetheless, that's where this lies. And to walk with God, to be constantly reminded of your nature, which you will have to come to know, because you cannot understand his unlimited love, his unconditional love, until you understand what it is that he loves. And so by having that constant remembrance of the divine within, this will happen. It is natural. It is the process. It's inevitable. Love does win.
How would you relate that to love somebody, like to love, period, just to love anyone or yourself or anything? How would you relate that to living in the moment? How would you relate it to
Well,
that?
it's the only way to do it. Yeah, it's the only way to do it. If you're truly living in the moment, when you lose that ego, the moment is a constant expression of love. And when you've learned to get that echo out of the mind, when you've learned to stop paying attention to the reflection of thought, and let that pure impetus, which is always love, just keep flowing and expressing, that's when you're fully present. Even now, it's like, this moment could be a number of things. You could be sitting here bored to death, like, oh my God, when is he going to shut up? I've got to get outside and do my walk and whatever. So that's one moment of reality in that. But you're not experiencing the moment, you're experiencing mind in that state. So if you can come to a place where you just be, no judgment, no need, nothing has to change, then love will become more apparent. First in yourself, and then when it becomes apparent here, you begin responding with it and to it everywhere else. So being present is being aware of the flow of love.
Can I go back to that thing you talked about, soul?
Yeah.
Isn't that really a product of imagination? It's not a material thing, right? I mean, we try to describe it as a material thing.
Yeah.
It's sitting here, sitting there. When I die, it goes up from the top of the head.
Yeah.
But these are all imaginations.
Yes, it is.
It could be.
Yes. But not just the soul, but you sitting in that chair saying that is equally
Yeah, imagination.
Yeah. So these questions I have not seen the answers to. But the answer that I like about them is this notion of a dream. You know, that the sages say this world is not unlike a dream. And when you're in a dream, the thing that I like is the whole world appears before you. You know, I've had dreams running through cities, and I'm laying in a bed, but I'm running through a city. I've been in oceans. I've looked at planets.
Flying.
Yeah, I've seen
Like
stars.
these in the air, yeah.
You know, but where was that? When I'm in a dream and I'm sitting here looking at a mountain range, where's the mountain range? Well, if I'm in the dream, I say, well, it's 250 miles over that way, and there. But where is it really? It's in the same room I am. I'm asleep in the bed. There is no distance between me and the mountain. It's a seeming. And this person that I've identified with in the dream, you know, quite often I get chased by hoodlums in dark city niches, you know, and I'm running in terror from these hoodlums, you know, because God knows what they're going to do when they catch me. It's not going to be good. But when I wake up and I start contemplating on that, well, why did I choose to be the victim in that dream? I was also the hoodlum.
But I'm glad I'm here on my bed.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, it's my dream. It's my dream. So in that dream, though, I had a particular perspective. I had an ego, the ego of the subtle body, you know, and it was identified with this particular point in that dream, and interpreted the whole dream from that perspective, and I was subject to it. But it's not hard for me to understand when somebody says about my dream, I was the whole dream, because I'm the dreamer. I'm not a particular in the dream, I'm the whole dream. All of it is within me. Now I can understand that when you tell me that about a dream, unless I'm dreaming. But when the sages tell me that about this experience, I can't understand that. I don't get it at all, you know. But they say it's the same thing. So what is the soul? The soul is Brahman. The Atman doesn't have division. But when you take that infinite soul and you align it or identify it with only one perspective in the dream, it becomes a jiva. It becomes an individual soul. You know, not because it actually is, but because you've chosen to take that perspective, and so that becomes the soul, and that becomes the experience. You know, but in fact, your soul is the whole dream. Is everything in there? It's there. All of it is a seeming. You know, there is no distance happening. And so that's exactly this life. And so by walking around in your dream, in the company of the dreamer, you get your constant reminder, I'm the dreamer, I'm not the dreamed. You know, I'm the dreamer, I'm not the dreamed. And the nature of this dreamer is me. He's a pretty nice guy. He'd never hurt himself. You know.
I have a question about the mind and the reflection of thoughts. If the mind is the creator of the thought, then why would it be reflected in the mind? Why would the thought be reflected in the mind?
No, the mind's not the creator of the thought. The thought actually is. It's actually not even really created. It just is, and it reflects off of mind. I'm hazy at that point. I'm not going to make too much pretense about knowing the origins of thought. But Nisargadatta says that you are the source of the river. You are not the river. And so when you apply that to thought, these things are emanating from you, from the self. You're not aware of them at that point, or you don't see them as that because you are that. And again, that comes to the face issue. You've never seen your face, you're not aware of your face, you don't know anything about it, you've only seen reflections of it. And it's the same thing. All the sum total of thoughts that have come out of you have only been motivated by love. They're always about an attraction or a desire or an imagining of love. There's some form of love. And that gets reflected off of mind, you know. And if you've never attached to them, yeah, if anybody has to go, you're welcome to go. We're over time, but
No, this is good.
yeah, this constant stream of manifesting love in the mind. We've talked about this idea before, that if you exist, if you can remove the ego, which is tied to the reflection and not to the source, you don't worry about your face. it just is. There's just isness to it, right?
But the ego also comes from somewhere. I'm guessing from where the thoughts are coming, right?
No, the ego doesn't come from there. If it came from there, it would be real, in that sense.
It's just
Ego is pure reflection. It's pure reflection. You know, it's you. It's an imaginary element, which is why it's eternally insecure. That's why, as an egotistical person, you can never be content, because the ego, being the seat of your existence, in fact has no existence. It's an ignorance. It's a misunderstanding of things. And so, if you build on that sense of self, of this ego identified with this non-existent thing called an ego, it spends the rest of its days trying to verify its own existence. And it will never have enough to do that. If it's going to base it on power, it's never going to be able to collect an infinite amount of power. If it's based on pleasure, it's never going to be able to collect enough pleasure. You know, if it's based on greed, it's never going to get enough
It's
material.
insecure.
Yeah, by nature, because it doesn't exist.
it doesn't exist. So it's like our life is like we got to understand like how our thoughts are playing, how our ego is playing, and transcend it. And it's like it takes an understanding of the ego to get to the state of where you can understand love,
Yes.
purity, and all that. It's
Yes.
like it's
Yeah, and that's why we're practicing. You know, that's why we're listening to these things, and that's why we walk out and become different by them. You know, to practice. It's funny that it's now practice, that being ourselves has to be a practice, because we've been something else for so long.
because the world is pulling us. So you got to
Well,
just to be. It's
Yes.
just to be. It takes
Who's pulling clothes
understand.
out? There's no world out there, that's the thing.
Yeah.
You're going. You're smelling it and deciding to go. That smell of pizza didn't actually do anything to me. It didn't pull me into the pizza restaurant. But I'll talk about it that way. You know, oh, I was pulled into the pizza restaurant.
That's the power that each of us has. That in spite of whatever the creation is outside, we are the creators of our world.
That's exactly it.
That's the
Once
beauty.
you know that,
Yeah.
there's no more fear.
That's the beauty of
Once you
human
know
life.
that to be true, you know, that the world, because right now, in our experience, we talk about the mind pulling us, we talk about our desires pulling us, all of the power that we're assigning to all those things is there because we gave it.
Yeah.
We gave that smell of pizza the power to pull us. We gave the power of that person to make us angry. We gave them that power to make us angry. I didn't have to get angry at what they said. I didn't have to hear a single thing they said.
Yeah.
But I chose to give them the power to make me angry. That person that's annoying us, they don't have the power to annoy me.
Yeah.
I'm giving them the power to annoy me. So all of these things, your temptations, you know, we love to be the victims because that way we can indulge and feel innocent at the same time. You know, so we make ourselves victims. It's like, oh, I can't control myself. I try so hard, and I just can't do it. You know, it's very difficult. It's a very disturbing thing to come when you start moving toward the realization that you did in fact choose it.
Yeah.
You know, and that when you begin to understand, wow, no, I'm doing this to my life. That's the first start to freedom, is when you accept the responsibility. I'm not a victim. I have the willpower. It's not a matter of not having the will. I have all the willpower I want.
It takes, like that's the whole first step is to know thyself, as Socrates said.
Yes, yes.
An unexamined life is not worth living. That's the quote he has, and that's a beautiful version. We got to invest in ourselves to see whatever God or the infinite has created us with what we are bestowed with us inside.
Yeah, see, we've changed our vocabulary a little bit, which is acceptable, but we've changed our perspective. If we're going to put a God outside of ourselves, you know, then it changes the nature of the conversation. Because really serving ourselves is serving everybody else.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful about that, because it's easy as spiritual people to become very self-centered. You know, I have to worry about that as a Swami all the time. Oh God, I hope it's not true. But anyway, that whole notion, you know, that We are this whole thing. And to improve the whole dream is to improve the dreamer, not to improve the status of a particular dreamed entity.
Yeah.
So be free. Walk with God this week and recognize Him in your heart. Don't attach Him to objects. Be free of objects and let this mystery of life manifest its mysteries to you.
Just smell pizza, just walk away.
Yeah. Or not, but know that you can do either one and be in charge of which one you decide to do. Don't feel like the pizza forced you to eat it.
Don't feel bad that you passed away after you don't.
Yeah, no, to take the picture as a whole and make your decisions and go. Once you
I'm just gonna go into that
Very
store,
interesting.
get that pizza and eat it, and not feel guilty about it.
Yeah, no, that's the thing.
Problem is you will.
Well, the discrimination happens in, see, boy, this can go on forever. But this notion, we'll just talk about the discrimination real quick, because this is an important point. When you discriminate, that means widen the boundaries of what you're looking at. The taste of pizza is always going to be pleasurable, but the overall effect of eating too much pizza is not.
Right.
So you have to broaden your boundaries of what you're considering. For me to decide I'm going to eat 4 slices of cake in a day, to the unripe ego, sounds very attractive because all it's thinking about when it eats that piece of cake is that moment of flavor, the icing on the tongue and the fruit and whatnot in there. But when that broadens up and you realize that you have a weight problem and you have a health problem, you have a heart problem because of that slice of cake, when you've opened up your awareness to consider the whole process,
Then,
you're going to dump that piece of cake in 10 seconds.
exactly.
Forget it, man. That's ruining my life.
It's just like a switch here, right?
Yeah.
The moment you understand, like,
Yeah, as long as when you broaden that and get in the habit of seeing the whole, understanding, look, I don't want to be unhealthy. I don't want to be unhealthy. Why would I think that eating a piece of cake is what I want to do? Now that's not to say you can never do that, clearly, all that stuff aside. But when you discriminate, learn to see things in their entirety. Don't just look at this sliver because you will always be deluded. Everything looks good when you keep it in its boundaries. But if you open those boundaries up and see it's the full story, then that's discrimination. And a life of discrimination becomes a life of truth, and a life of truth is bliss. Yes.
Maharaj, I have a request, and that desire can be fulfilled by you. Some bhajan or song.
A song? Okay, well, I'll sing a song and we'll end it with the song.
Is there something in the...
Desire.
Yeah.
Is it not getting burned?
That's a good desire.
You smell burnt?
Yes, there's India and Africa.
No, I'm saying...
Out of many of your qualities singing.
Yesterday we heard you sing.
Yeah, it was so good, right? Without piano.
Yeah, this one's Truth in My Dream. Since it's open, this is the one. When all is said and done, when the last words have been sung, it is you who will fill my yearning heart. You are the essence of life. Open my eyes. You are my only goal, the meaning of my play. Open my ears to your gentle voice. As the sun shines beyond the storm, so, my Lord, in back of this restless mind, you dwell. waves of life, they rise and crash to the shore. And as I walk, I'll stumble and I'll fall, but I know your hand will lead me on, my true guide. As the sun shines beyond the storm, so my Lord, in back of this restless